There was a certain king. He was proud and haughty and arrogant. You could say that this king wore an impervious mask, and although his kingdom flourished, his life was one of a pursuit of pleasure, and one of his greatest pleasures was hunting. So very often he would go with a group of courtiers out into the forests to seek deer, wild boar. But one day when he was out, chasing a gazelle deep into the forest, he lost his entourage and found himself lost deep in this vegetation. He was tired, so he descended from his horse, lit from his horse, and sat down under a tree to rest. And he was just nodding off into a sleep when he heard a sound. And when he opened his eyes, there in front of him was an old man. Immediately, the king had great fear that this was someone who had come to assassinate him. So he jumped to his feet and took out his sword and pointed it at the old man. The old man dropped to his knees before the king and said, "Your Majesty, don't you recognize me? I'm Ahmed, the keeper of your horses. I've been in your service since I was a small boy. I know the names, the sires and the dams of every horse that you have ever owned." At that moment, a great wave of change washed over the king, and with great shame he placed his sword back in its sheath and lifted Ahmed to his feet and took his arm and said, "Ahmed, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your family." And as Ahmed led him back the path to his palace, they shared the story of Ahmed's life. When they returned to the king's palace, from that moment on, the king took great pains to know the names and hear the stories of everyone who came in to his presence. And there's a reminder of another story that allows a question to be asked. It's about that farmer who had 3 sons. A part of his farm was a herd of goats, and his 3 sons were the shepherds who took the goats to the pastures every day. The goats were milked and sold in the village nearby. But it began to be told that there was milk from a certain goat that, when it was taken, allowed ailments to be healed, to bring prosperity to those who drank of this milk from this goat. And so this milk was sought after by the villagers. So, of course, the family were curious. How could it be that the milk from this goat was richer and pure and had these qualities that the other goats did not have? So notice was taken by the sons, the shepherds, and they found that when they took the goats to pasture, one goat disappeared, but would come back when it was time for them to go and be taken down to the barn. So, in discussion with the family, the eldest son said, "I will go and find out where this goat goes." So the very next day, the eldest son followed the goat and found that the goat came to a cave and entered that cave. Now, in the interior of the cave it was dark, and the eldest son could only follow the sound of the goat's bell. But as the eldest son entered the cave and followed the sound, he came to a great cavern, and somehow in the cavern there was a faint light. And when his eyes became accustomed to the dim light, there in front of him he see something glistening. And when he looked more closely, he could see that it was gold. Gold coins filled this cavern. With great excitement he filled his pockets, his cloak, with the gold coins. And then he departed. But as soon as he came to the mouth of the cave, the gold disappeared. He went back to explain to his family what had happened. And the second son said, "I will follow the goat." So the next day, the second son followed the goat, and the goat led him to the mouth of the cave and led him with the sound of the bell. Now the second son, having heard his brother's story, was certain that he was not going to be tempted by the gold. He would follow the sound of the goat's bell. So, in following the sound, he found himself in another cavern. And there again was a dim light. And in that dim light, he saw the form of a beautiful naked woman. And his manhood rose with desire. But when he went to embrace the woman and put his arms around her, she disappeared. But the sound of the goat's bell was long gone, and he had to return to his family and explain what had happened. So the third son said, I will follow the goat. And so the next day, the third son followed the goat into the cave, and he came to the cavern where the gold was. And, having been told the story by his brothers, he resisted and followed on into the cavern, where again the naked woman appeared to him. But again he'd heard his brother's story, and so he followed the sound of the bell. And then he came to a vast cavern, and in the dim light he saw an old man standing before a lectern on which was an open book. There was a greeting exchanged between them, and the old man said, I'm reading an ancient sacred text, but I've come to a place in the text where I don't quite understand its meaning. Will you discuss with me? And the young man, himself being a seeker of knowledge, and himself having read the sacred texts, felt drawn to get into discussion and debate with this old man. But then he could hear the sound of the goat's bell receding, and suddenly he remembered what it was that he was to do. And giving obedience to the old man, apologizing, but saying, I must follow and complete my task, he took his leave and followed the sound of the bell. Very soon after, he found himself emerging into a place that he had never imagined before. Trees with abundance of fruit, lush pastures, running streams filled with fish. And he thought to himself, I must go back and tell my family, because there he found the goat eating the lush green grass of this place. But when he went to find the mouth of the cave that would lead him back to his family, it could not be found. There he had to rest, leaving the members of his family behind. So the question that can be asked is, when we transcend the desire for survival, for procreation and knowledge, where do we find ourselves? Where is this place where we can never return again to that which was. Where are we now? Haven't you found yourself in a place where you can no longer return to that which was? Can you take back those things that have fallen away from your life? And do they not represent those 3 levels of life? As is this story, the desire for existence, the desire for procreation, and the meaning of that, and the desire for knowledge. Where are we then? What has this to do with taking away our masks? You know. You know.